right, hello and welcome to Creditversio's Q&A Wednesday live for September 6th, 2023. I'm your host, and I am back from vacation, had a great time, ready to get started here. You know what, I just realized that I am missing two things. There we go, got my logo, got my name underneath. Okay, great to see you, and looks like we've got already a good group jumping on. Sorry I wasn't here last week. Hope you got the notification that I was taking a well-deserved vacation. But being gone for 7 days, I think has gone a little bit too long, and I'm glad to be back with you. So today, it's a live Q&A session. If you're new to Creditversio and you got questions about the software itself, that's what I'm here for. If you got questions about credit repair, credit scores, how things work, I've been doing this for a little over 10 years now. I've read tens of thousands of credit reports, coached a lot of people through this process, so I'm happy to be with you today and walk you through the whole process. So if you're first time with me today, don't be shy, say hello. Just give me your name. Well, your name's going to be in there. Just let me know if you're new and what round you're in. And or if you haven't gotten started yet and you're just looking at Creditversio and wanted to jump on because you got a notification that we were live today, let me know, and I'm here to help you guys through the whole process. All right, so let's get started with a couple of things here. James, good to see you. Ra El Mago, welcome. Good to see you. And we got a handful of people jumping on again. So looks like there's a little pent-up demand since I wasn't here last week. Okay, so today, every time I do a live, I always try to do a demo of Creditversio, and then we get really deep into Q&A, and that's perfectly fine. And I never really quite get through it, so we'll try again today. And if, as we're going through, if you have any questions that are either on topic or not on topic, that is perfectly fine. Sabino, welcome. Good to have you. Welcome, Ma'at. Hopefully I said that right. I probably butchered it. My apologies. Okay, well, let's get started. So I'm going to share my screen with you real quick. And I want to go over a couple of things. Let me, there we go. Perfect, that worked. See, here's where I get rid of my, nope, that's not what I needed. That's not what I needed. Okay, here we are. All right, perfect. So here's the home page. And what I want to draw your attention to is, I would say, one of the more important aspects of the repair process, at least getting started, that a lot of people tend to be missing lately, and that is adding your photo ID and proof of address. So, and it comes in phases too. What I mean by that is sometimes we'll have a small handful of people using Creditversio who get that response saying, hey, we'd love to do your dispute. We'd love to resolve this for you. However, you didn't provide us with the required ID. And that's a problem. It means you'll lose a month. So you're in your first round. The first round, you're getting a reply back that isn't the results of an investigation. You're getting a reply from the Bureau saying, we don't know who you are. And this is particularly a problem if you've moved recently. So at the top of your credit report, you have a section that's called your PII section. It's personal identifiable information. That's going to be your first name, last name, date of birth. It'll have previous addresses, previous occupation, current occupation. So, and that's just the stuff that we see, but there's a lot more to it than that. And if you've moved recently and the address that you are now at that is on your dispute letter, if that is not in their database, sometimes they, and there's no ID in your dispute letter, sometimes they're going to kick that back at you. So you want to make sure that you're adding your photo ID and proof of address. And Rel Imago, I see your post here. I'm going to put up in just a second your question, but I want to get through this first real quick. So we're going to go to my account. You can also do it from the home page. So down here, if I didn't have a photo ID added or a proof of address, it wouldn't have this check mark right here. It would have a little couple of words that say add it, and it would be a link. So you click add it, and it'll take you over to this section right here in my docs, and you would have an option to add your ID. So I've already got it in there. So proof of address is going to be anything that has verified your ID. So what the bureau's like are utility bills, because for you to get a utility bill, gas, electric, water, trash, um, cable, satellite, also insurance, car insurance, homeowners insurance, renters insurance, all of those entities did pull your credit. Maybe they did a soft pull, maybe not. And they verified your ID. So that's good enough for the bureaus. So in this case, to give you my example, I uploaded now this is just something I doctored up, but this is Nevada Energy. And really what the bureaus want to see is your name and address. And I've got it right here. And their name, sometimes address too, but Nevada Energy is big enough to where it's not an unknown utility company. So that's what I've used for my proof of address. And then for photo ID, best thing is a state issue ID, driver's license, state ID card. You can use a passport if you need to. And the whole reason for your proof of address is because the assumption is that I make anyway, and that it's a very safe assumption to make, is that maybe you've moved and the address on your ID doesn't match where you live now. It's very common. Not everybody gets a new driver's license when they move. So that's what the bureau is going to go off of. Okay, really good. And then let me get over to this question here. You go back. I'd like to know, what is the best practice usually after you send a letter? The bureau's used to answer in 1 or 2 weeks. Is it necessary to wait a month for the next round, even when they answer yes? In fact, we covered that in the tutorial videos. That's a great question. The reason why you want to wait is, and this is something that I didn't know until a couple of years ago when I got this from both John Olsheimer, who was formerly with Equifax and FICO, and Steve Rieger. I've had both of these guys on numerous times, and Steve used to run the Western Division of dispute resolution for TransUnion, so the California branch. And both of them said the exact same thing, that, yeah, even though you can get a response in as fast as 7 to 10 days, the data furnisher still has that full 30 days to change their mind. So it's possible that they may have given one response, and then either at the end of that 30-day or close to the end of that 30-day timeline, they might change that. And sometimes they might change that. Let's say they deleted something, and this is not very common. It's very, very rare, in fact, but just to give you an example, since we're on the topic, one of the things they can do is if something was deleted because they couldn't verify it for whatever reason, and then maybe the next month they were able to verify the information was correct, and that's called a reinsertion. They might put the account back on there. Again, don't let me scare you with that. That very, very rarely happens. But the point is, I know that the hardest part of this whole thing is waiting. And I've gone through it. I got into this business, or I got into credit repair as a client about 11, actually maybe closer to 12 years ago. And it takes years of activity for us to have that decline in our credit. Sometimes it's a major event. Maybe it's a bankruptcy or a job loss or an illness or something like that. And I know when we want it fixed, we want it fixed. We want to do it as fast as we possibly can. But there is some patience to this, and that's where that 40-day timeline comes into play. So you're going to spend a little bit of your time, probably a week or two, waiting a little bit longer than you'd like to. But it's worth it, because if there is a change at that 29-day mark, you want that time so that Credit Versio is going to get the most recent up-to-date credit report 30 days after that dispute has been initiated. So, all right, let's see. Justin, when I signed up, somehow I ended up on Smart Credit website for the purchase. Is that correct? Yeah, that's correct. So Credit Versio is a free software platform, but it needs a credit report from somewhere in order to function. We're not in the credit report business. Just like if you were to buy a car, you're not going back to Ford or Honda to get gas to run it, but it needs gas to run. So that's what Credit Versio needs. It needs a 3-bureau credit report from a partner that we're compatible with. So you're going to create your Credit Versio account, step 1. Step 2, it's going to ask you link an existing Smart Credit or Identity IQ credit report. If you don't have either one of those, then pick one, and you're going to create that account right there. At least with Smart Credit, you'll create that right there in Credit Versio. We do have a funnel built, so you don't have to leave the site to create your account. If you want Identity IQ, you'll go you'll go out of Credit Versio for a second to create that account. Then you come back to Credit Versio and add your username and password, and then those two will link up together. Good question, Justin. Okay, getting back to this section right here. So proof of address, ID, really important component. You don't want to lose that first round, having the bureaus come back to you and say, hey, we'd love to do this investigation, but we don't know who you are. Okay, going back to the home page. So once you've got that settled, the thing to really pay attention to is are the dates right here. Yeah, you're welcome, Justin. Yeah, it's a great question because you do have it. It does throw people every now and then because you do have two companies you're dealing with. You've got Credit Versio, and then you've got Smart Credit, Identity IQ, whoever is compatible with Credit Versio that you're using. So going back to the home page here, pay particular attention to the date. So this is a brand new account, or rather, round one dispute just came in. Here's your countdown at the very top. So the second thing that on occasion we see people maybe a little off point is not paying attention to the dates. So you have a finite time in order to create your disputes and drop them in the mail. Now, as it is, it only takes you maybe 20, 30 seconds to create a dispute for a bureau if you're really, if you've got a small report and you're really breezing through it. Maybe a few minutes at the longest. And if you've gone through this, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. It doesn't take very long, especially if you're just going through clicking the suggested reasons. If you want to do some custom reasons, if you've got some documentation that verifies the information you're disputing is not correct, then it might take you a few minutes more. But it's 1,000 times faster than trying to do templates and doing it all yourself. Okay, now let's see, Rick. Yeah, Rick, this is in fact, one of my most popular videos says, what are your thoughts on Metro 2? Oh, let me go back to my home screen here. Credit repair. I keep hearing that more and more. Yeah, so Rick, I like as I said a second ago, I'm not sure if you were on the whole time, but I've been in this space for coming up on, it'll be 11 years this October. And one of the things about the credit repair industry, and I say this with a lot of humility and a lot of caution, and that is that this is an industry that is just filled with a lot of bad information and bad ideas. And probably one of the reasons why everywhere you look, there's some regulatory agency trying to curtail what this industry is doing, and for good reason. And there's a lot of great actors in this industry, too, who are doing right by people and really helping people out. So every year or two, some magic bullet comes out. It gets everybody excited. Now, when I say everybody, I'm talking about those who are either new in the industry, don't know much about it, because there's 100,000 so-called credit repair businesses in the U.S. Mostly it's just mom and pop shop stuff. And most of those people don't really have a lot of good foundational information. They tend to get bad ideas from credit repair people who got bad ideas from credit repair people. It's one of the reasons why when you see me bring guests on, I bring guys like John Alzheimer, 30 years in this industry with FICO and with Equifax. I'll bring Steve Rieger, 27 years with TransUnion, ran the entire dispute resolution department. I've had a couple of attorneys that specialize in consumer protection law. And the reason why I do that is because debunking a lot of bad ideas is something that I spend maybe 20, 30% of my time doing when I get on these calls or when I'm replying to comments on Facebook and YouTube. Now, that's all a build up to what do I think about Metro 2? Metro 2 has been debunked as utter nonsense so many times that we even did a video on it. In fact, if you go to our YouTube page and just put, in fact, you don't even need to go to our YouTube page. Just put in Metro 2 disputes, and then the video that I did with both John Alzheimer and Steve Rieger will come up as one of the top videos. And it didn't make Metro 2 people happy because essentially the claims that Metro 2 disputes make is untrue. And one of the things that I always ask people who are really adamant about Metro 2, I'm like, okay, largely everybody in this industry knows everybody. And we all go to the same seminars for the most part. We're all part of the same private compliance groups where we talk back and forth about changes in the industry. So when I say that, I'm either friends with or I'm only one degree of separation from essentially everybody in the top 20 in credit repair, the question I ask people is, out of the top 20 people in credit repair, you know how many established companies, big companies, are using Metro 2 disputes? Zero. And the reason why is because we all know better. We've all seen these little tricks and techniques and things that look like they work, but they don't really work. Not when you look at them over large periods of time with data, where you're looking at data. The part that people have to get past is the anecdotal feeling they get when they're doing disputes and they're using this technique or that technique or this technique, like, oh, this one works because it worked for my last 5 clients. Well, it's not really proof. So we know just on a fundamental level, because we have so many experts, in our fray, people that we work with, that we know this stuff has just been debunked over and over and over. And it's not something that those of us who are in this space, who know how things work on the back end of dispute processing, we just don't take that seriously at all. So Metro 2 is just the next one. I've seen probably a dozen of these over the last 11 years, and this is just the next one. And this will fade out too, but it only really appeals to people who are brand new in this business that don't have a working knowledge of how the dispute process works, at least as far as on the bureau end. Okay, Scott, have you heard of using CFPB complaints to get negative items removed from credit reports? Yeah, as a matter of fact, when that came out, I remember when the CFPB opened that channel to file complaints, and man, I don't know if they regretted it or not, because that became a really big tool used by credit repair companies. Like, they were logging on and creating accounts as clients and filing disputes, and it was a big deal, and it worked really, really well for a while. I didn't do that at my former company. This just wasn't a strategy that I take that back. We did use it for a short period of time, but just felt a little awkward about it, and then we stopped doing it. But it was really, really effective. I don't think that credit repair companies do that anymore. We certainly don't do that. That's not what Credit Versio does. But if you have a legit, and this is my area of caution, if you have a legit complaint and it's not getting resolved through the normal dispute channels, then that might be something to do. But I think it's lost a lot of its shine and luster because it's been so heavily abused. And that's really the fault of the credit repair industry, I think. So it might not be taken quite as seriously as it was when that was offered as an option many years ago. But Scott, give it a try. If you, like I said, if you've got a legitimate concern, and just be careful. Don't make a claim that's not true, because I don't know what kind of repercussions there are, but it's not a situation you really want to get yourself in. Okay, Greg, having an issue, having our removed as an authorized on his credit report. He was removed on the car 2 months ago. Let me see if I can read this one more time. Having your son removed. Greg, not sure why that would be really a big deal. Have you called the credit card issuer? Your son could call them as well. I'm not really sure why that would be a big issue. I've seen that done so many times with people who have had a dispute on an authorized user account where the information was derogatory, and it was really a phone call, and it was removed. So I would go through the dispute process. If it's a derogatory item and it's an authorized user, that's something that Credit Versio understands. It's an account classification as far as an individual, joint, authorized user. So if it sees authorized user, it's derogatory. I'm not sure what the status of your account is that you don't want your son on anymore, but let's just say it is a derogatory account. Credit Versio will see that and understands the dispute reason. So it'll let them know that, hey, I'm just an authorized user on this account. I'm not responsible for the balance. Please remove this. And I don't know why that would continue to be a problem, but that should be resolved with just a simple dispute. Okay. Yes, Scott, you are very welcome. Okay, yeah, great. Give it a shot again. Written is always best. But like I said, that's not an area where I see a lot of people having problems. Okay, Scott, loving your program so far. My first round went out 2 weeks ago. Thanks so much for all your educational videos. I watched so many. That's great to hear. One of the things that is paramount to the repair process, and I think this is one of the things that gets lost from time to time, is, and I totally understand, and I'm sure this was my perspective too when I came into credit repair as a client, is that you think that it's really just one thing, which is, let me just dispute and keep my fingers crossed this stuff comes off, and then I'm going to have good credit again. And unfortunately, it doesn't really work like that for everybody. Now, for some people, it really depends on what else they've got on their credit report. The example that I've given probably thousands of times back when I used to personally consult with people when onboarding them for credit repair and then doing customer service and then counseling, was when it became an issue of, hey, I got all these things deleted, but my score's not moving. Why? What's going on? What's wrong? And I would tell them that, let's imagine that I had 6 classes and I got an F, or let's say I got a D. Let's not be so dramatic. Let's just say I got the D's in all 6 of my classes. So what is my GPA? It's a D. Well, what if somebody comes along and very generously and graciously removes 4 of my 6 D's? What's my GPA now? So think of the D's as derogatory credit, okay? Well, what if somebody removes 4 of my 6 D's? What's my GPA now? It's still a D. So in order for me to lift my GPA, I've got to fill those 4 classes with hopefully straight A's if I can. So that's really the balance, is the absence of derogatory credit does not mean the presence of positive credit. All that the dispute process is doing is removing things that potentially are having a derogatory impact on your score. But then at that point, it's reliant solely on what are the positive things on your credit report, and is there enough of it? And are they old enough? And do you have enough good recent behavior to lift that score? Can the good credit outweigh the bad credit, even when derogatory credit is being removed? Now, sometimes I'll see clients, or worked with clients in the past, where they've got 10 positive accounts, but they got 30 derogatory accounts. And the 10 positive accounts are just old clothes, like paid car loans or paid accounts that aren't open anymore. So even though they're getting a little bit of credit, they're not open, and they're not giving them, it's not really providing as much benefit as they could be. Or they've got a couple of brand new secured credit cards, and it's all very new. They don't have big limits. There's not a lot of history there. And they might get 10 or 15 or even 20 derogatory accounts removed from their credit report, but their score's just not moving. And that's because credit scores are really a lot about what are you doing now and what have you done in the last 24 months. So one of the reasons why you'll hear me and John, when John Alzheimer's on with me, we'll talk about how relatively easy it is to recover from minor derogatory incidents like 30-day and 60 days within 12 to 24 months. Because after that 24-month mark, whatever happened has much less weight on it. Your score is really an indication of what the bureaus, or what FICO and VantageScore think you're going to do in the coming 24 months, largely based on what you've done in the previous 24 months, including what you're doing today. All right, so Tim, my driver's license has my physical address, but my bills have my PO mailing box. Oh, can you use both? No, you got to stick with one address. What I would do for you, Tim, is you need to make a decision as to where you want your replies from the bureaus to go. So if you want to use a PO box, then that's on your driver's license. Then I'm sorry, your PO box is what you use as your mailing address. If you want the responses to go to your PO box, then you need to give them a utility bill that's got your PO box on it. They're going to go off of that. They're going to go off your utility bill, not your driver's license. That's why we provide them those utility bills. So if you want your replies to go to your home address, then give them your driver's license, and you need to have some kind of utility bill, some other second type of verification that has your home address on it. So that's what you'd need to do. Scott, great analogy. Never thought of it like that. Yeah, that was an analogy I had to come up with out of necessity, because I had to explain to people in a way that's easy to understand why their score is not moving and what they need to do to get it to go up. And that was one that was relatively easy for people to wrap their heads around, especially for me when I was new in this. Okay, so great questions. I love the activity. Let's go back to, and again, feel free to throw in a question. I'll get right back to it. So going back to the dates. So this being an example, of a credit report that came in today, September 6th. The red is under the dispute plan is letting me know that I've got something to do. So here I've got to create a dispute letter, and I've got to send this letter by the 13th. So it's giving me about 7 days. So 7 days is really the stretch. You got 1 week. Now, it doesn't take that long. I know I sound like a broken record, but you could do all of your disputes in a matter of a couple of minutes. But it's not uncommon where people will sign up for their Crediversio account on a Wednesday or a Thursday. They're like, oh, this looks great. They'll watch a tutorial video, and they're like, okay, I really want to pay attention to this. I'm at work right now. I'm going to watch this over the weekend when I'm home and I've got some time. So there we've lost about 3 days, maybe 4 days. They do their dispute letters on a Saturday. There's no mail on Sunday. They finally drop them in the mail on Monday. So there already we've got like about 5, maybe 6 days that have gone by. So that's why we give that 40-day buffer in there. Even though somebody asked a question earlier, why do we have to wait the full 40 days? That's one of the reasons. The other reason is that possible changes can take place really at 0 hour on day 29 from the data furnisher / creditor, and we want to make sure we give them all the time that we can, although that doesn't happen very frequently. All right, going back, love the questions. James, who answers the Crediversio Facebook messages, got a question. Travis is the one that usually answers those. Travis is very good. So if you have a question, Travis is fully qualified to answer whatever questions that you've got. Paulette, how do I move a collection account? It was removed before, but now it's listed under another company. It's no different than how it was removed the first time. The cool thing about collections, Paulette, is that a lot of collection companies, a lot of third-party collection companies who buy debt, there's really two kind of collection companies: those who are assigned debts, meaning they are contracted by the original creditor to collect from you, and they keep a percentage of the revenue they're able to collect on behalf of the creditor. So, for example, let's just say, I've got an account with Citibank. It gets charged off. Citibank is not really in a position. They don't chase people around for debt after a certain period of time, especially after it's been charged off. And let's say they assign that debt to XYZ collection company. So XYZ collection company, who is in the business of collecting money, and it will pursue me in a way that's very different than Citibank will, they're going to call, they're going to take whatever measures they can in order to collect. And if they do collect from me, even if it's a smaller dollar amount, then they'll have some predetermined dollar amount or a percentage of what they collect that they're going to keep, and the rest goes back to Citibank. So that's a collection company that works off of debt assignment. And then there's what's called a debt buyer. So let's just say we'll use Citibank again, and let's just say my business model is I don't like assigning debts to collection companies. I'm going to just write them off, and I'm going to sell them to a debt buyer. And maybe I sell them for 20 cents on the dollar or 10 cents on the dollar, something like that. It depends on several different factors. So when we're talking about that, and by the way, Paulette, that is probably the majority of the type of collection companies you're going to see out there are those who buy debt. They buy them in bulk. They buy them on spreadsheets. They might buy 100,000. They might buy 100 million, all at the same time. As far as the face value of the debt, that's not necessarily what they paid for the debt. So the reason why I'm telling you this is when you go through the dispute process, you're using Crediversio or you're disputing yourself. one of the things that you're going to be asking them is to verify that they have proof that they have a legal right to collect. This is right out of the FDCPA. This is the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. So they have to provide you with some documentation that shows that not only do they own this debt, but they bought it from the original creditor. They're going to have some documentation. It might only be one page. They don't have to send you like statements going back for years and years. All they have to do is send you a document saying they got this account from, let's just say it's Citibank, using that same example, on such and such date. The account was opened on this date. It's in default. This is the balance, so on and so forth. You'd be surprised at how many collection companies that buy debts don't have that. So the deletion rate, percentage rate for collection companies tends to be among the higher things just for that very reason. So to swing back around and answer your question, I guess, for the second time, Paulette, is, yeah, it happens on occasion. Usually when something gets deleted, it might get sold to another debt collector. But typically, I mean, don't hold me to this. This isn't a guarantee, but this is my experience, and this is what I've seen, doing this as long as I have, that usually when it comes off once, it will usually come off a second time for the very same reason why it came off the first time, is the second debt collector doesn't have any more or less information than the first one did. So their ability or inability in this case to verify the information and prove they have a legal right to collect and have the documentation that they're required to have is probably just as unlikely as it was with the first collection company. So give it a dispute and keep your fingers crossed. And like I always say, if it's a legitimate debt and they are able to come back and verify that, yes, we bought this debt, we legitimately own it, here's the documentation, we can collect from you. Debts are assets. So if anybody ever tells you that, oh, you don't pay a collection company, you don't have to pay them, you're under no obligation, that is believed to be true all the way up to the point where the process server comes and knocks on your door and you're going to court. So not a good idea to ignore collections indefinitely. At some point, not always, but at some point, they might escalate and it can become a problem. So you want to settle as opposed to running from debt collectors, which can go very poorly. Scott, do you have an affiliate program or way to help us as well? Scott, we did have an affiliate program for a while. It turned out it just wasn't quite, it didn't go off as big as we thought it would. It turns out that for us, what works best are other credit repair companies and people in fintech who have large databases and they want to integrate a DIY service. But it's just never made sense for us to do an affiliate program. I wish it did, but it didn't. So we still have it active for some of our affiliates that are doing a trickle of business, but we're not onboarding any new affiliates at a time. I really appreciate your interest. I wish we had something for you, but it just turned out it wasn't really scalable. Scott, why do so many other YouTube people say never dispute more than 3 or 4 on one letter? Yeah, I got the answer for that one. Watch your videos mentioning to put all on one letter, and that's what I did. Yeah. So Scott, if you trace this all the way back, where does that come from? What? Imagine. Let's go back and focus on what is the whole point of the dispute process. What's the reason why we have a Fair Credit Reporting Act, which, by the way, was written in 1970? Well, the reason is to protect us from information that is incorrect on our credit report. So let's say, as an example, and this is a real-life example, let's say somebody experienced some identity theft, and they've got 20 accounts on their credit report that are not theirs. Can you imagine a set of circumstances where the federal government would say, hold on now, you can only dispute 3 of those 20 illegitimate accounts on your credit report at a time? Doesn't make any sense. So you are entitled to dispute anything on your credit report that you want at any time for any reason. The burden of proof, the burden of performance is on the creditor / we call them data furnishers because they're supplying data to the bureaus and to the bureaus themselves. Okay, so where does that 3 to 4 at one time come from? Well, it comes from companies in the credit repair space who only want to dispute 2 or 3 accounts a month because you're paying them a monthly fee. Okay, that's where it comes from. And this language disappeared over the years, but I remember 11 years ago when I got into this, you would read forums and blogs from people, from actually pretty good sized credit repair companies that would say, oh yeah, you don't want to dispute more than 2 or 3 accounts at a time because it can have a negative effect. And then that conversation went away because somebody got sued at some point, because you can't say that. It is factually inaccurate. So that went away. But, and I'm not going to mention their names, but if you think about the largest credit repair company that has ever existed, most people who are watching this probably know who that is. I'm not saying they're the ones that did that, but they're the ones that created that mindset in the industry that you can only dispute 2 or 3 accounts a month because that's all that they did, and you paid them a monthly fee. The reality is, if I have a grievance, if I have information on my credit report that is not correct, and I have lots of things on there that aren't correct, there is no limitation to how many of those accounts I can dispute. I am within my legal right to dispute as many as I want. So to answer your question, Scott, that's where it comes from. Not out of the goodness and with the intention to do right by customers. It was definitely a greed play, and one that this industry is it's going to have to bear the burden of that kind of indiscretion. But it definitely put that in the minds of so many people that there are even credit repair people who believe that that's a legitimate thing when it in fact is not. We've had 350,000, 58,000 people create a Credit Versio account. We've had about 100,000, 120,000 people plus go through the entire dispute program. Nobody's ever had any problem or any kickback with somebody saying, or the bureau saying, you can't dispute all these things at once. It's not a thing. Great question, though. I'm glad you. Yeah, it makes sense now. Yeah, that's one of the things that I've had that conversation so many times over the years. Before Credit Versio, when I was doing full service credit repair, where people, because we never did monthly fee at my old company. It was always paid on results, and we disputed everything at the same time, and people were just like shocked. Like, what do you mean you don't charge a monthly fee and you can dispute all this at the same time? And I had to explain that to them. That's a monthly fee business model, which is not in the best interest of the consumer. Okay, James, can we use the deletion of an account from another bureau, Equifax, as a reason to dispute the same on an account, TransUnion / Experian? You can, and sometimes that works, but it's not a real reason. In fact, Credit Versio sometimes we'll use that as a dispute reason because we do see that it works sometimes. But to qualify that, it's a great question. To qualify that, the 3 separate bureaus are totally separate entities. They really don't even communicate with each other unless the federal government says they have to, like cases of identity theft. But they all have slightly different methods of doing things. Their investigation process, even though it follows federal law, is slightly different. So you might get a deletion on Experian and TransUnion, but Equifax, they did something totally different, and they were satisfied at the result that they got from the data furnisher, and they're not going to take it off. But telling Equifax, like, hey man, TransUnion and Experian deleted this, how come you don't? They don't typically care for that kind of a dispute because it doesn't have anything to do with who they are. So it's a great question though, James. Lynn sent my first rounds yesterday. Congratulations. That's just getting started is 90% of this whole thing. I mean, it's 90% taking the action, 10% going through, watch your tutorial videos, watch your credit coaching videos. One of the reasons why they brought me on board is there's not a whole lot of certified FICO pros / instructors in the U.S. There might be 30 of us, maybe 50. I'm not quite sure, but I created those videos because for a lot of reasons. One of them is I wish I had them. I would love to have had those videos when I graduated from high school or when I was in college. I wouldn't have gotten myself in the trouble that I did if I just had like a little bit of understanding as to how the whole credit industry works in the U.S. It's very, very different from anywhere else I've come to find just through my, just traveling and talking to people. But definitely take some time and watch those. For a lot of people, it's like, oh, I never knew that, but that makes sense. Okay, Brandon. I'm on my third round of disputes with Crediversal, and it doesn't give me a suggested dispute reason. Normally, Brandon, that shouldn't be on third round. That's usually fifth round because it's 1, 2. Round 1, 2 is a follow up. Round 3, 4 is a follow up. What I email support at crediversal.com and let us know what that account is. Be curious just to look at it, but that's very, very rare. Normally, we don't see that kind of response until Crediversal just really runs out of anything to dispute. It's not finding any errors, so it's going to go default to statistically the next best reason, and it's usually got something for 5 rounds. But in your case, I don't know. It's interesting. Okay, Benny. Let's see. Can you dispute a charge-off? Yeah, you can dispute anything you want. So what Crediversal is going to do is it's going to read that charge-off account to see and compare that account across all 3 bureaus to see if there's anything on there that it finds as a problem. And if it doesn't see anything, then it's going to look at who is the creditor. Is it a Citibank? Is it a this, that, Barclays, American Express? It's a charge-off. Okay, statistically, what's the most successful dispute reason in the lineup? And that's what it'll offer you as a suggested reason. And it might be something that doesn't really appear to be remarkable. The thing to go by in credit repair is getting success is just starting the investigation. If you can get an investigation started with a dispute, all kinds of things might happen. The data furnisher might change the information. They might make a mistake that wasn't there previously. And so when you go through round 2 and 3, and then sometimes we see things getting deleted at round 4 and round 5 because things change so much and there was a mistake made. And it's very, very different from what happened with that round 1 credit report in round 2. So that's really the key thing is, if Crediversal does not find an error on your first dispute, don't worry about it. It's perfectly fine. Sometimes those errors come or the challenges come as you get into round 2 and then round 3 and then round 4. So just starting the process is the thing to do. Kiana, how much can a bankruptcy typically affect your score? It depends. Treading water, seriously considering. I see. So maybe considering filing bankruptcy. Is that what's going on? So a couple of things, and I'll give you my opinion from looking at 25,000 credit reports over the last decade or so. One thing I've noticed is that the bankruptcy is there for a reason. And if it's your best answer, it's your best answer, and you make that decision with your bankruptcy attorney. And it's there to help people get out from underneath debt that you can never get out from underneath. Now, what will it do to your credit? Strangely, and I have to qualify this very carefully, it's a lot easier to recover from a bankruptcy than it is to have to wait for things like charge-offs and collections and late payments to age off while trying to rebuild at the same time. I'll give you an A column and a B column. A column is doing the credit repair process. You can't file bankruptcy. It's not a good idea, but you're going to go through the credit repair process and you're going to take time to recover. A lot of the minor things you can recover from in about 12 to 24 months. Collections, charge-offs, 3 years, 4 years, until you really can have a respectable credit score. And this is assuming that you're doing everything else right. You have new credit. You're not maxing out your credit cards. You're not engaging in any high-risk activity. So it's a longer haul for sure, but you will get there. With bankruptcy, and I've seen so many credit reports over the years with bankruptcy, because bankruptcy was a real thing in higher volume when I got into space in 2011, 2012. We were just coming out of the Great Recession, lots of bankruptcies. I mean, I hardly ever saw a credit report that didn't have a foreclosure or a short sale. Hardly ever see those now. But it cycles back around. It'll come back around. But the thing with the bankruptcy is when you file bankruptcy, all of the debt the debt collectors can no longer collect. So all of that debt is at least eliminated on the credit report. So it's all zero balances. So it's not uncommon to see a bump up in score because all of the debt load has been eliminated. The other thing too is that now it's a lot easier, as funny as this sounds, it's a lot easier to reestablish credit because there's a whole industry. There's like a whole cottage industry of lenders that are wanting to offer you credit for a couple of reasons. One is they know you don't have any debt anymore, and they know you can't file bankruptcy again, so you have to pay them. So it's a fresh start. It's like hitting that reset button. Now you can start from scratch. And I've seen people file bankruptcy and 18 to 24 months later have scores in the mid 700s again. So, and I'm not advocating, hey, file bankruptcy. I'm just telling you objectively, as somebody who's looked at tens of thousands of credit reports, this is what I see. So it's a lot easier to recover after the bankruptcy. The penalty that you'll pay over, certainly in the first 24 months, is I don't know what it is now, but I think it might be 24 months where you can't buy a home because nobody's going to underwrite a loan for you. If that's not a concern, then okay, then that's not a big deal. And there are some lenders that are just not going to approve you for things. So you've always got really three primary things that go into qualifying for a loan. You have credit score, you have lender underwriter guidelines or lender criteria, and then you have debt to income ratio. So, and debt to income is really mortgage, personal loans. It tends to be bigger things. Nothing that takes place with like auto, like what do they call it? Automatic underwriter, where like for example, if I apply for a credit card, chances are I'm going to get approved in a matter of 30 seconds. No human being is looking at that. It's just automatic. So, for example, let's just deal with the first two, which is credit score and lender guidelines. So lender guidelines, I'll give you a great example. I know with, and I just had this conversation recently, which is why I'm going to use this one because it's fresh in my head, where there's somebody that I know that has credit scores in the high 780, I think, 770, 780, great credit score. Their bankruptcy, I believe, is 8 years old, so it's 2 more years before it falls off. So it's an aged bankruptcy. Everything else on the credit report is right. It's been good. They've been paying things on time. Pretty much all the derogatory stuff is aged off or it's been deleted, and it's really just that bankruptcy in the public record. So he got declined for an American Express card. It's a premium American Express. I can't remember which one it was because there are some lenders, American Express is one. There's certainly several others out there, or many others out there, where they don't really care what your score is. The fact that you filed bankruptcy in any time in your history, they don't like it, and they're not gonna approve you. So those are going to be fewer and far between. Like, yeah, you're not going to get American Express Black Card in the next 10 years if you file Chapter 7. That's just the reality of it. So there are certain minor penalties that will come with filing bankruptcy. But in the grand scheme of things, if you're just living everyday life, you'll buy a home in a few years, or buy a car, get a credit card. Those are things that you're going to be able to do. And yeah, you'll pay a little bit heavier of an interest rate, but life tends to be a little bit easier on the bankruptcy route if that's the right route to go as far as recovering score-wise, in my opinion. Okay. Tim, if you get a bankruptcy deleted, can those creditors listed now come after you for that debt? No. Bankruptcy is a bankruptcy that's listed on your credit report is purely cosmetic. It's a public record. It remains on the public record. The creditors who are included in bankruptcy, they don't care what's on your credit report. Debt was dismissed in bankruptcy because that's a legal proceeding. Okay, Brandon Red, the bureaus have 30 days from the time of receiving your dispute to investigate, but what about the investigation? Do they have only 15 days according? Well, they can ask for a 15-day extension twice, Brandon. They didn't even do that during COVID. So that really isn't a thing that I've ever seen. In fact, I asked John Olsheimer about that when a couple of times ago when he was on. And if you haven't seen John on the program or on the live, John has been in the credit space for 30 years, and he spent a good chunk of that in dispute resolution with Equifax. So he really has a good working knowledge of what goes on in the dispute side. And I don't think he could even tell me a time where he saw that. And this is back when it took longer to do disputes than it does now. Now it's very, very fast. So it's not really a thing. I don't ever remember in the 25,000 people that I worked with personally in the 10 years. I don't think I've ever talked to a client that ever had a 15-day extension request, let alone a second 15-day extension request. Let's see. Abraham, is it worth sending another dispute letter when Discovery already has sent back information providing I had late payments? Not really. You know, I would do 2 rounds of disputes. And if they come back and it's legit for sure, they can verify that you were late at this time, then just move on. Here's one thing, Abraham, I always let people know when it comes to late payments. Are we talking about 30, 60-day lates? Are we talking about – actually, why don't you answer that one first, and I'll swing back around. Let me get Brandon's question here. But are we talking about 30 and 60 days, or are we talking about 90 and 120 and beyond? What are your thoughts on consumer laws such as FCRA and FDCPA? Brandon, you got to be way more specific than that. What do you mean? What are my thoughts on it? I mean, it's the reason why we can do what we do. It's all predicated on consumer protection law, FCRA, FDCPA, and there's a handful of others as well. Yeah. Okay. So 9120. So these are major derogatories. Yeah. Minor derog, 30-day, 60-day. You can recover from those in 12 months, maybe 24 on the out. 90 to 20, maybe 24, 36 months. But again, it's if you can't get them deleted, Abraham, you can't get them deleted. I mean, that's just the reality of the situation. I wouldn't fret on it. What's done is done. The great thing about credit scores and the way the algorithms work is they're very heavily weighted on what you're doing today. What are you doing now? Do you have credits? Are you managing it well? Are you keeping your utilization rates down? Ideally, you want to pay your credit cards off every month. Contrary to whatever you hear from people, that's the best route to go, is paying them off every single month so you're not paying interest. You're demonstrating your ability to use credit responsibly. Those are the things that are going to help you probably a lot more than fussing and fighting over 90 days and 120-day lates that might be a year or 2 old. If you can't get them deleted, you gave it your best shot. Move forward with using credit responsibly. Put as much distance between yourself and the derogatory event as you can, and time will just do that automatically, and you'll recover. Your scores are largely based on what have you done in the last 24 months, and particularly what are you doing right now? What are you doing today? How are you managing your credit today? It's one of the reasons why you want to go through the coaching videos, because there are some things in there that people do that are very high risk, and they don't know they're high risk because nobody's ever told them they're high risk. And they don't sound like they would be. Like, I'll give you an example, having little balances on multiple credit cards. We call it nuisance balances, and FICO and VantageScore both don't like that. And I've seen people's scores drop considerably. I've had people call, email, like, how come my scores went down 50 points? Nothing changed. I'm like, well, yeah, it did. You have 3 credit cards that have balances this month, and they didn't have balances last month, and they're only $50 here, $100 here, but multiple cards with balances is not a thing that FICO and VantageScore like. So it's little things like that we talk about in the credit coaching videos in the tutorial section. Patricia just joined Creditverso and sent out my first dispute letters on 8/28. Already seen results. That's great to hear. Congratulations. Like I was saying a second ago, just getting started is 90% of it. Just get started. Opening up an investigation is sometimes all you need to get a deletion or get a repair. Brandon, will CV include consumer law in this dispute at some point? No, it will not. It will, Brandon. If you want to red flag yourself as a credit repair company, you don't need to put consumer protection law in the dispute letter. for a couple of reasons. The biggest reason is you don't need to tell the bureaus the laws that they have to follow. They know them. They know them better than you do. So you don't need to tell them what the laws are. Second is that's the thing that credit repair companies generally do, not big companies. Like I was talking about earlier, there are certain things that inexperienced people in the space believe, and there are things that people who are experienced in the credit repair space know not to be true. So if you looked at the biggest top 20 credit repair companies out there, they don't cite laws and put this in case law and that, because they know the bureaus already know the laws because they operate fully off of them. And the other thing too is you're going to red flag yourself as a credit repair company, and they can legally ignore your letters if they believe it came from a credit repair company. It's called Exception G in the FCRA if you're really one of those guys that wants to look it up. In fact, I'll show you right here. I think I've got it. It's a screenshot. Yeah, here it is, Section G. So this is right there in the FCRA. I think, Brandon, you were asking me what my thoughts are on the FCRA. And having read it, this is required reading. After it goes through and explains everything that data furnishers have to do in the dispute process, at the very end of it, it goes, oh, by the way, if we think the letters, you can read the language right here. If we think the letter was either submitted by or prepared on behalf of the consumer by, or submitted on a form supplied to a consumer by a credit repair organization, they can ignore it. In fact, when we were first going through COVID, the CFPB sent out a letter to the credit bureaus reminding them, hey, this might be a time where you're going to get spammed by a lot of credit repair companies. You can ignore their letters. So that's another reason, Brandon, why you don't ever want to put case law in a letter. It's going to get flagged. Crediversial can see the errors, can see violations, but it's going to write the dispute as a regular person would write a dispute if you really knew what you were talking about. So you're going to come across as a sophisticated consumer, not somebody who's been coached up or hired a credit repair company. And that's one of the reasons why the statistical data that we see of results is just as high, if not higher, with Crediversio as it is on a full service credit repair company. Scott, that might be a little bit too much. Break your question down into smaller chunks so I can get it on the screen. And we're going to wrap up here in about 3 minutes. So I hope I'll get to that one. Abraham, only 22. Oh, wow, you're 22. Oh, that's great, man. I wish I knew this when I was 22. Great job. I'm so happy that you're getting this early on. Just joined and sent out letters yesterday. Really excited to see the results. What a great system. Awesome, David. Thank you so much. I appreciate you using it. The big thing for you, David, is just stick with it. This is a multi-round process. This isn't indefinite. Crediversio is not something that's trying to bleed people month after month, in perpetuity. This is a 4 or 5 month program. Okay, credit repair, if you hired a real professional, they're going to want to go 4 or 5 rounds of disputes. So that's really like a 6-month process. That's about how long. Credit repair has always been a multi-round process. It's very rare you have a full resolution off of the first dispute. In fact, we have a saying in the credit repair space, which is the dispute process really begins at round 2. And that's because round 1, you might get that blow-off letter, which says, hey, we think this information is reporting accurately, or everything's been verified as reporting accurately, because they know a lot of people are just going to quit and go away, and they're like, oh, well, I gave it a shot. And then they don't do anything after that. So when you do that round 2, David, especially, and fingers crossed, maybe some things get deleted and you get lucky. That happens quite a bit. But for things that are going to take a little bit more work, that need a little more finessing, maybe there's some errors there that the data furnisher just didn't review the letter. When you swing back around with that round 2 dispute and it says, hey, I don't agree with the outcome of this dispute. How did you come to this conclusion? Please explain to me how you came to your conclusion. Well, they're not going to give you notes or anything like that. But essentially what that tells them is like, oh, shoot, man, this David guy's not going away. He's going to come back with another round. Okay, now we have to perform under the FCRA or FDCPA, and we have to reply to this. And that's really where you see a lot of the activity. Whether things get verified as reporting accurately, for sure, or things get repaired or deleted. Brandon, sorry to spam me with questions. Always miss your lives. It's okay, Brandon. Nobody's ever spamming me with questions. I can sit here for a while and answer questions. Okay, Scott, let me just read this real quick. Yeah, you're going to have to break that down for me. Okay. Hard to explain. It's not an urgent question. Scott, if you want to just email in, if it's a little bit more complex, support at creditversio.com, or you can just email me, David M. at creditversio.com. I'll answer it for you. Let's see. Luis, hope I didn't get that wrong. Hi, David. I used Creditversio. My credit has been great ever since. Thanks again. You're very welcome. That's awesome. Love to hear it. What do you think about pay to delete letter to the furnished? So I do have some thoughts on that. This is a subject that I like to talk about. There's no if you go through the credit reporting resource guide, this is there's something called the CDIA. It's the consumer. Well, let me go back a little bit further. So all data furnishers have to comply with certain guidelines, and it's not the FCRA, not just the FCRA or the FDCPA. There's something called the Consumer Data Industry Association, and they wrote what's called the Credit Reporting Resource Guide. I don't have it in here. It's about 232 pages long, something like that, and it explains to data furnishers what they're supposed to do specifically in a dispute, how they're supposed to report things, what they're supposed to do, what they're not supposed to do. Well, one of the things in there that they're admonished not to do is to delete history in exchange for payment. So they're not supposed to delete the history of the collection. Oh, by the way, this only works for collection companies, what I'm going to tell you here. It won't work for original creditors. It's not like American Express or Ford or anybody else like that. But if you're working with a collection company, they're not supposed to delete the account in exchange for payment, but they do all the time. So I wouldn't do that in writing. I would do that over the phone, because they certainly don't want something they're not supposed to do memorialized in writing. So I would, if you're going to settle with a collection company, just say something like, let's say I owe $1,000. I'm going to call them up and say, listen, I really want to get this taken care of, but I want to work with you. Let's see if we can come to an understanding here. I can pay $400. I can pay it today. In exchange, though, I need you to either email me or mail me something that says that you'll delete this from my 3 credit reports in exchange. Now, I pay it, you delete it. Otherwise, to be honest with you, it's not really doing a whole lot for me. The damage is already done. If I pay it, whatever, I would just kind of play it like that personally, and see if you can get them to play ball with you. They might come back and say, well, okay, that all sounds good, but we want $500. Then it's just a matter of negotiating the dollar amount. So I like the idea of it. I don't see anything, I don't see anything wrong with it. There are others who have different opinions, but if you can get them to delete it in exchange for payment, I would do that over the phone and negotiate it. Okay, got it. Thank you for explaining that. Is there a way to delete hard inquiries? You can dispute them, but David, I wouldn't worry about it. That's one of the things where, like, we build white labels and we build software for very big credit repair companies. As a rule of thumb, they typically don't dispute inquiries. And the reason for that is, while it's true that an inquiry can affect your credit score, it's not true that it always does. And if it does, it's not significant, maybe a few points. So you could go through a lot. In fact, it's one of the reasons why we didn't put it in the trade line section, or like if I want to create a dispute, I'll show you here. If I want to create a dispute, oh, it logged me out. All right, well, never mind. Sorry about that. Okay, what I was gonna demonstrate to you is we put inquiries down below public records because that's how low they rank, and we do it that way because even if you were to get all of your inquiries deleted, it's very possible that it would make no difference in your score whatsoever. I've seen that. I've seen people get lots of inquiries deleted, or pay companies to get inquiries deleted, and their score went up like 3 points, and they paid money to get 3 points. And the reason for that is no version of FICO or Vantage Score cares about inquiries after they're 12 months old. Now, even though you can see them, they're cosmetically on your credit report for 12 months, they don't play any role in your score. On your credit report for 24 months. They don't play any role in your score after 12 months. Also, depending on when these inquiries came in, if it's Vantage Score and they all came in within 45 days of each other, it doesn't matter. You're going to have inquiries all over the place. Then those are only counted as one inquiry. So what you might look at your credit report and go, oh my God, I went to go buy a car. They ran my credit like at 9 places. I got 9 inquiries. I wonder what that did to drop my score 100 points. No, it didn't drop your score 100 points. All of those inquiries were deduped into one inquiry. If it's FICO, Vantage Score is 30 days. FICO is 45 days. So as long as they're within the same industry for FICO, they're deduped as one inquiry. So that's my long-winded way of saying, don't worry about hard inquiries. They're so insignificant that, and even if you got them deleted, you probably wouldn't even notice the increase because you have something called score migration, where you've got your score going up and down 10 points, 20 points, 15 points, 10 points. You wouldn't even know if your inquiries were the cause of that or not. I've had this conversation a million times. I always tell everybody, don't worry about it. Let's see. Brandon, with CV, I got my student loans and a collection deleted on my first round of TransUnion Experian. Great. Congratulations. You know, the great thing about you doing your repair is you're in control of this. You can take credit for the fact that you're having real progress with your dispute and not paying somebody or fumbling around with maybe some templates. Nothing wrong with templates. Templates are perfectly fine. But, you know, it can be a little cumbersome. It's nice having the software just doing this stuff for you. For a relatively low cost, just whatever you're paying for your credit monitoring company. Let's see. Lynn, I just realized I need to get my utilization down to under 10% or zero. Yeah. I have balances on a few cards. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I'm glad you realized that. Ideally, I say this with complete empathy for every time I've been asked this question. I understand it's easier said than done to get your utilization rates under 10%. Credit cards are really the worst form of a loan you can get because the interest rate is so high. Credit cards, ideally what they're supposed to be used for is to pay for things where cash isn't practical and then pay off your balance in full. And if you got a card where you get points, then there's some advantages to that as well, or points or cash back or whatever they're offering. But so often we use credit cards as like a anytime loan, and it's the best credit cards, the lowest interest rates I've ever heard of are like 15, 17%, but most are like high teens. If it could be low 20s depending on the type of card. So as a rule of thumb, Lynn, you just want to not have credit card debt. It's never a good thing. It can take a long time to pay off too. Let's see. Anderson, I think we'll finish up with Anderson here and we'll call it a night. Can I get a credit card, and then dispute the inquiry so I don't have so many inquiries? I would not do that at all. So as a rule of thumb, great question, Anderson. As a rule of thumb, you don't want to dispute the inquiry from a furnisher who's giving you credit. And the reason why, and this especially applies for credit cards, because if you swing back around, let's say they give you a Visa card, whatever, and you swing back around a month from now and you dispute the inquiry, they're going to go, oh my gosh, why would Anderson dispute this inquiry? He inquired about getting a credit card and we gave it to him. This could be identity theft, and they will shut that card down because they're going to think, based on that dispute, that you disputed that in error, or that you applied for that card in error. So they're going to make some assumptions, and once they shut that card down, they shut that card down. So not something you really want to do. Things for, again, this goes back into my conversation about inquiries in general. Inquiries sit for both Vantage Score and FICO, sit in the smallest section that makes up your credit score. It's about 10%. That doesn't mean inquiries are 10% of your score. They are not 10% of your score. Your inquiries are part of several things that make up 10% of your score. Inquiries, as I said a minute ago, I'll use the same phrase I've used for many, many years. While it's true they can impact your credit score, it's not true they always do. And even if you were to delete all of them, the likelihood of that having a significant impact on your score is slim to none. So don't even waste your time. Let's see. Brandon, will take you as the last one here. What does it mean if a account says it's charged off, collected with the original furniture? Yeah, what that means is that the original furniture, whoever that was, like let's say if it was a collection charge off from, I know when we say collection charge off, most of the time we're talking about two different things. A charge off is with the original creditor. A collection is usually a third party collection company that's trying to collect on that debt. But if you look at a credit report, it actually is it's CO, it's collection charge off. It means the same thing. When you see it under original creditor, you're going to see it's a charge off, but it's also referred to as a collection charge off. It just means that the original creditor wasn't able to collect. They are the original furnisher or creditor. In this case, they're using furnisher, and that they charged off the debt. All right. Well, we went pretty long today, hour and almost 15 minutes, and still got a big group on. Thank you so much for joining me today. I will be back next week, Wednesday. I'll have John Alzheimer on with me, and we'll be answering your questions live again. Thank you so much, everybody. Great time, great questions. Always enjoy being here with you. And if you have any, you want to do a little bit deeper of a dive, you can always on Facebook anyway. You can post, and we'll swing back and answer it because we can see those. If it's YouTube, it's a little bit more difficult. Just send us an email at support@creditversio.com, and we'll be more than happy to answer your question. Thank you so much for joining me.